Picture this for a second. You're standing on the edge of St. Andrews Bay today. Maybe you're near the marina. We're just looking out at the water. It's scenic, it's peaceful. You hear the water lapping against the sand. Maybe a sailboat drifts by. It feels permanent, right? Like it's always just been this lovely, quiet corner of Florida.
It is a comforting image. It feels established.
Yeah.
But that sense of permanence is, it's a bit of an illusion. If you peel back the layers of time, that peaceful bay looks a lot less like a vacation spot and a lot more like a chessboard.
A chessboard where the pieces are empires moving fast and the stakes are life and death. And that is exactly where we're going today.
Yeah.
We are taking a deep dive into the history of St. Andrews, but not the town we know now. We're going back before the storefronts, before the streets, and specifically before the arrival of John Clark. This is Chapter 1. Under Changing Flags.
And it really is a fascinating era because we're looking at a paradox. How can a location be known on a map for centuries? I mean, literally recognized by major powers, and yet remain almost invisible as a place where people actually lived.
That's the core question we're tackling. It's the story of a place waiting to happen. And to help us navigate, we've got a great stack of sources. We're pulling from the ancient echoes and hidden harbors of St. Andrews Bay for those greedy details, and Bob Taylor's Under Changing Flags, which really helps us zoom out.
And the mission for this deep dive is to understand how those shifting borders, those changing flags, shape the destiny of this bay. Why did it take so long to take root?
Okay, let's unpack this. Because when we say history, we usually think of written records. But the story of St. Andrews starts way, way before that. It starts with shells.
Massive amounts of shells. We call them middens in archaeology, but that word, it sort of makes them sound like common trash heaps, which really underplays what they were.
Right, we're talking about monumental structures. Enormous heaps of oyster, scallop, conch shells lining the coast. Some of them are foundations for live oak trees that are over 500 years old today.
Exactly. Those trees are sitting on centuries of dining. It's mute evidence of a pretty populous ancient civilization. But here is where the ancient echo source gets really specific. Excavations revealed something unique to this coast. Urn burials.
Okay, hold on. Urn burials. Can you break that down for us?
Well, in many Native American cultures of the Southeast, burial practices varied wildly. But finding large ceramic urns used to hold remains is a very specific cultural marker.
So it's like a cultural fingerprint.
Precisely. And that fingerprint suggests these early inhabitants might not have migrated down from the Florida Peninsula or from the north, like you'd expect. The evidence points to a migration from the southwest.
To southwest, like closer to Mexico or Texas?
Potentially. It implies a connection to a different cultural lineage entirely. So even thousands of years ago, this bay wasn't a backwater, it was a destination.
But then the flags start showing up. The Europeans arrive. The Spanish show up in the early 1500s. And on their maps, St. Andrews isn't a town, it's a feature.
That's a crucial distinction. To the Spanish navigators, they're looking for survival. A safe harbor is priceless. You name it so you can find it again. It's believed the bay was named for either St. Andrew Corsini or St. Andrew Avellino.
Just throwing saints' names at the coastline, hoping for some divine protection?
Essentially, the coast was dotted with saints' names. It was a way of claiming the territory spiritually, even if you didn't have a single soldier on the ground.
But the people living there, the ones building those shell mounds, they weren't exactly rolling out the red carpet. We have this incredible chronicle from the Narvaez expedition in 1528. This is Cabeza de Vaca writing.
And it's an amazing account.
He describes a land of palm-thatched houses. And get this visual, the chief comes out wearing civet marten skins.
Now that is a weird translation that historians have had to puzzle over. Civet marten.
Yeah, I don't recall seeing many martens running around the Florida panhandle.
You wouldn't. If we look at the biology and the description of the fur, it was likely skunk skin. Specifically, the reddish fur of the spotted skunk.
A chief in skunk skins? That is a serious power move. I am wearing the animal everyone else runs from.
It certainly leaves an impression. But the meeting did not go well. De Vaca writes that the indigenous warriors were tall and well-built, and they attacked viciously.
So violent that the Spanish explorers actually destroyed their own canoes and fled westward just to get away.
It sets a tone, doesn't it? This wasn't an empty paradise, it was defended. And for the Spanish, this bay became a place of hazard as much as refuge.
Speaking of hazard, we have to talk about the devils in the air. This is 1559, the De Luna expedition. They're trying to land, and then wham!
The first Recorded tropical hurricane on these shores.
A 24-hour storm. Now, put yourself in their shoes. You're from Europe. You've never seen anything like this. The sources say it was so intense the colonists swore they saw actual devils flying in the wind.
It's a powerful reminder of how alien this landscape felt. We understand low-pressure systems. They only had theology to explain it. It must be demons.
And this answers the question of why the Spanish left it as a desert for so long.
Right. It was useful as a mark on a chart, but not a priority for settlement. It was, as our sources put it, useful but invisible. St. Andrews offered skunk-wearing warriors and demonic winds. So they stayed away.
So, for 2 centuries, it's just this wild spot on the map. But then a flag change. 1763, Spain cedes Florida to England, and the British. They're not just looking for safe harbors, they're looking to make money.
This is a massive geopolitical shift. The British treat the territory with commercial ambition. And for St. Andrews, this means we finally get accurate charts. Admiral Gold maps the bay between 1764 and 1771.
And they actually try to build a town? This part blew my mind. I always think of St. Andrews starting later. But there was a British town called Wells.
Yes, Wells. Likely on the west side of the bay, near what we call Dyer's Point today. The government granted land to disbanded soldiers to encourage settlement.
And this wasn't just a rough camp. The sources describe neat houses. They had industry. They were producing indigo, naval stores, lumber.
Let's pause on that, because naval stores was essentially the oil industry of the 18th century.
Really?
Oh, absolutely. Wooden ships run on pitch, tar, and turpentine. The British Navy was the most powerful force on Earth, and it was thirsty for pine resin. St. Andrews was surrounded by pine forests.
They were plugging into the global military-industrial complex. And indigo, too, a very expensive blue dye.
A cash crop. They were trading with a big firm, Panton, Leslie & Co. They even had the first Masonic lodge in the region.
So it was a real community.
It was a thriving little pocket of civilization, a place of cheerfulness and plenty, according to the records.
So what happened? Why aren't we visiting Wells, Florida today?
Politics. The flag changed again. In 1783, after the American Revolution, Britain lost. Florida was returned to Spain.
And just like that, it's over.
A total evacuation. The British settlers left en masse. And there's a really poignant detail here. They didn't just leave their businesses, they left their homes. They left the graves of their dead.
That is just heartbreaking. You build a life, you bury your family there, and because some treaty gets signed thousands of miles away, you have to walk away.
And nature reclaimed it almost instantly. The sources say the fields the British had cleared were overgrown by rosemary bushes.
Rosemary, like the herb.
Wild rosemary. For years afterwards, that was the only marker that a town had ever existed there. Just acres of fragrant shrubs where the neat houses used to be.
That is such a haunting image. A ghost town turning into a field of rosemary. It really drives home how fragile these settlements were.
And when the British left, St. Andrews went back to being wild.
No man's land. That's what the sources called the period from 1783 to 1821.
It was a gap in governance. Spain technically owned it again, but they were weak. So who fills the vacuum? Everyone who didn't want to be found.
We're talking Spanish fishermen, runaway slaves, Seminole Indians, and my personal favorite detail, pirates.
Or freebooters, to be precise.
The legend of Smack Bayou. The stories say they used those secluded coves to careen their vessels. What does that actually involve?
It's a vital maintenance. In the warm Gulf waters, ship hulls get covered in barnacles and shipworms. It slows you down. So you have to drive the ship into shallow water at high tide, then pull it over on its side so you can scrape and tar the bottom.
And you can't do that near a major port.
No, you need a deep, hidden cove. St. Andrews Bay is basically engineered by nature for this.
So while London and Madrid are arguing over lines on a map, St. Andrews becomes this pirate service station.
Exactly. But it wasn't all just romantic adventures. This was a violent time. The sources mention border warfare. The indigenous population, the Seminoles and Creeks, were still a major power here.
They were clashing with American forces starting to push down from the north.
So you have this chaotic mix of pirates, natives, runaway slaves, and soldiers. It's the Wild West, but in Florida.
Until the map stabilizes again. The United States acquires Florida through the Adams-Onis Treaty.
Finally, the flag stops changing. And that stability allows for a different kind of growth. In the 1820s, we start to see the early economy of St. Andrews form. But it's not built on industry like Wells. It's built on the bay itself.
It sounds like it was almost a seasonal resort before it was a town. Wealthy planters from Alabama and Georgia coming down on pilgrimages.
Resort might be too fancy a word. They were coming to catch and salt, fish, mullet, mackerel, pompano.
The salty economy.
That's a great way to put it. This is before refrigeration. If you wanted fish back at your plantation, you had to catch it and salt it immediately.
And they brought enslaved people with them to do all the hard labor?
Correct. It was a functional extraction trip. The bay was known for its red bluff landmarks, but it was still a rugged frontier outpost, a fishing camp waiting to become a town.
So if we pull all these threads together, what does it all mean?
Well, first, there's the theme of being known but overlooked. St. Andrews was on the maps early because safe water is priceless. But it was never the main act. Pensacola always got the glory, the forts, the big investments.
St. Andrews was the backup singer.
In a way, yes. And that shaped its character. And that brings up the second point, bay-driven versus inland-driven. The economy was built on salty work fishing, salt making. But later on, when the railroads come, they care about inland routes.
And St. Andrews isn't on an inland route?
Not at all. And the final big theme is simply stability. You can't put down roots in shifting sand. The story of Wells proves that. If the flag changes, it all turns to rosemary bushes. It wasn't until the U.S. border stabilized that a permanent community could actually root in.
It's fascinating. For centuries, this place was just waiting. It had the deep water, the resources, the beauty, but it needed the politics to settle down.
It was pulled forward by faraway powers. Decisions made in palaces and capitals thousands of miles away determined whether St. Andrews was a pirate cove, a British town, or a field of shrubs.
So to recap, we've gone from ancient shell mounds to a violent living spot for conquistadors. We've seen a polite British town vanish into the wilderness, and then a lawless pirate haven.
And by 1827, the stage is finally set. The map is stable. The seasonal fishermen are there. The Red Bluffs are a known landmark. But it's still just a camp. It needs a catalyst.
It needs a person.
It needs a figure with the gravity to transform it.
And the sources tease that figure. The bay is waiting for John Clark.
That's the turning point. But before we close the book on this era, there's a thought that keeps nagging at me.
What's that?
We know about Wells because a few records survived. But it makes you wonder, how many other ghost towns, like Wells, are buried under the vegetation of the Florida coast?
Oh, that is a wild thought.
Places started with hope, but forgotten, simply because the political winds shifted. We see the history that survived, but we rarely see the history that was erased by a treaty.
It makes you look at those live oaks and those scrub bushes a little differently, doesn't it?
Indeed.
Well, next time, we're going to meet the man who finally made it stick. We're going to discuss the arrival of John Clark and the birth of the St. Andrews we know today.
I can't wait. It's a very different kind of storyless international intrigue, more community building.
Thanks for taking the deep dive with us. Catch you on the next wave.